Audio check.
Good afternoon and welcome to this executive meeting of North Somerset Council. I'm Don Davis, Leader of the Council. I have to do my budget airline introduction for you all. I would like to welcome everyone to this face-to-face meeting of the executive in the new council chamber. In line with public health recommendations to exercise caution on our own health and safety advice, the number of councillors, officers and members of the public in attendance in the chamber is still limited to ensure the meeting can take place safely. There is an option to join the meeting via Microsoft Teams for those councillors and officers who do not yet feel comfortable attending in person or are unable to do so, and they will be able to partake in the meeting but will not be in attendance formally, and if a member of the executive will not be able to vote or count towards the quorum of the meeting. We are streaming today's meeting live on the internet, and a recorded version will be available to view within 48 hours on the North Somerset Council website. Thank you all. I'm now going to commence the formal agenda. Item 1, which is addresses by members of the public. I'm not aware of any. There are none. Item 2 is apologies for absence. I will ask my colleagues on the executive to introduce themselves as a way of getting our attendance in line. So I'll start with my vice chair.
Thank you, Don. My name is Councillor Mike Bell. I'm the Deputy Leader of Council and the Executive Member for Adult Care, Health and Housing.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Solomon. I'm the Executive for Neighbourhoods and Community Services.
Good afternoon, Councillor Steve Bridger. I'm the Executive Member for Assets and Capital Delivery.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Catherine Gibbons and I'm the Executive Member for Children's Services, Lifelong Learning and Skills.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ash Cartman. I'm Executive Member for Corporate Services.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Bridget Petty, an Executive Member for the Climate Emergency and Engagement. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Caniford, Executive Member for Place and Economy.
And we also have in attendance Robert Payne.
Good afternoon. I'm Robert Payne, Assistant Executive Member for Parking Strategy and Delivery.
And the Assistant Executive, also Councillor Nicola Holland, will be joining us online once she's managed to get back to her home. Thank you very much. So I think that means we're all here, Mr. Brain. Thank you. So the next item is item 3, the declaration of disclosable pecuniary interests. Are there any colleagues? I'm seeing no hands up, so there are none. Thank you. The minutes of the meeting of the 20th of October 2021, of which I was only virtually here due to a positive COVID test, and my colleague Mike Bell led the meeting. Thank you, Mike. Would you like to propose acceptance of the minutes?
Yes, happy to move approval, Chairman.
Thank you. And does Mike have a seconder? Mike Solomon. Okay. Are we all in favour? We are in favour. Thank you. I should now sign those. Now we move on to item number 5, which is non-executive council addresses to be informed by noon on Tuesday, of which we have one, which is Councillor Mark Crosby, who is here in person. Mark.
Thank you very much. For the benefit of anyone watching, I'm Councillor Mark Crosby. I chair the Council's Adult Social Care Scrutiny Panel, and I represent the good people of Clevedon South. I just wanted to provide you with an update on the inquiry day that we held on the 19th of November. The scrutiny panel's decision to hold an inquiry into the impact that COVID-19 has had on the carer community in North Somerset, particularly amongst the informal and unpaid carers, was prompted by a number of issues. The Council was already in the process of refreshing and refining its carers strategy when the pandemic began to take hold. We already know and knew that the service was facing significant funding and market challenges even before COVID struck. So when it happened, it simply applied an almighty stress test to an already vulnerable structure. But it also presented a demand for a level of innovation, adaptability, and sheer social effort that many of us had never experienced before. I think we all recall there was no book called The Beginner's Guide to Managing a Pandemic, although I'm pretty certain we could write a fairly good one now. Clearly, we all struggled from the outset, and particularly at the beginning. But what we were also able to recognise as scrutiny panel, and no doubt on from a wider context, was that the COVID-19 spotlight had begun to highlight some significant positives that had grown from all of this, often evolving from within our own communities. And these had a key role to play in planning for the future. Clearly, we had a pretty clear understanding about carers, as defined by and as such known to and supported by the Council. But the pandemic presented us with a huge increase in the number of hidden or unsupported informal carers. Many of them wouldn't even begin to describe themselves as carers. They could be elderly or vulnerable people themselves looking after frail family members, or young people, even children, looking after parents or siblings. Informal carers, of course, also took on the role of caring for neighbours and friends. What the pandemic showed us was that almost anybody could find themselves in a caring role, and their need to know about available resources and where to get advice is critically important, especially where situations arise that appear to have the potential to take us beyond our abilities to cope. And so, on Tuesday, the 19th of November, the ASH scrutiny panel opened the first day of its inquiry into the impact that COVID had had on the delivery of care support throughout the pandemic. The inquiry was a live, face-to-face, day-long event held in this chamber. It began with an introductory speech by Emily Hofhausen, OBE, the Director of Policy and Public Affairs for Carers UK. That's the largest of the UK charities for unpaid carers. Emily opened her speech by stating that virtually overnight, they saw 4.5 million new carers, 2.8 million of which were working people. 70% took on more care at the beginning of the pandemic, and very swiftly, it was 81% taking on more care. 8 out of 10 of them said that conditions for care for people had got worse. We then heard 4 local residents describe the extraordinary challenges and issues that they faced in seeking information and guidance. And it's important to note that these were not people who had long cultivated experience of navigating the world of care support services, even less so during a pandemic. We then heard testimony from a number of key service providers, including our own single point of access service, the Carers Support Alliance, the Alzheimer's Society, Curo Group, Health Watch, Avon and Wiltshire Mental Health Partnership NHS Trust, the University Hospitals Bristol and Western NHS Foundation Trust. They came, they spoke. Each of them had 15 minutes in which to present a summary of their experiences throughout the pandemic and their conclusions and aspirations for the future. After a short break, and it was short, the panel hosted a roundtable discussion with councillors representing Clevedon, Nailsea, Long Ashton, Winscombe, Sandford, Tickenham, Wraxall and Fayland. We asked them to identify their principal challenges and the steps they had taken to engage with their community. We asked, on looking back, what were the actions taken by you as a council that made the greatest contribution towards delivering and sustaining the local support network? We also asked, looking forward, if needed, could you do it all again? That was a challenging question. We received a large amount of evidence from the participants, much of which will be featured in our forthcoming report. It's also clear that there are other organisations that we need to speak with, though there are some clear headlines beginning to emerge. And these are just headlines coming from what has been said at this point. We need a dedicated carer coordinating officer and a carers champion. We need a wholesale review of the Council's website in order to enhance and better project its information path for carers. The adult social services element needs ongoing investment to ensure that the information remains relevant, timely and appropriate. Carers gave testimony regularly to suggest that they cannot find the information they need, and this causes extra pressure and stress, which invariably results in carer breakdown. Remember, we're not just talking about the people who are known to us. It is that enormous army of informal, unpaid carers who would not describe themselves as such, but nevertheless do that role. We need to explore the opportunity for Carers Support Alliance being more like Crossroads as it was, particularly with respect to providing carer advocacy and support. We need to help refine Voluntary Action North Somerset into the kind of infrastructure organisation that our town and parish councils are pleading for, and to support and further develop the work that Richard Blows and the community organisations are doing, whilst fundamentally recognising the important role of the community in delivering the wider council's holistic health and well-being strategies. There is a lot more to come, and we look forward to carrying out that work. What I just wanted to conclude at this point, I just wanted to express some thanks to some people. I wanted to thank Nick Brain, for recognising that the inquiry, for the inquiry to really work, it needed to be a live event. Thank you for that, Nick. Hayley Verico and Catherine Benjamin for their insight into what we needed to ask and for recruiting the people we needed to listen to. To Leo Taylor and Brent Cross for their patience in dealing with, I think I was pretty challenging throughout the preparation of that event. And of course the ASH panel members who participated and played a key role in the questioning. As I say, we have a report to prepare and we have other people that we need to speak to. I predict at this point that the results will be challenging, and that all goes back to that question: could you do it all again? Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Crosby, for that very detailed update on your work, and thank you both to you and to indeed all your helpers in producing that. And the challenge you put at the end about could we do it all again, given the news the last few days, may be quicker than we think, and I think it's a massive challenge and one we have to make sure that we can deal with. So thank you for that. We do appreciate it, and a report will be coming forth in due course from your committee? As soon as your typing skills permit. Lovely. Well, thank you for that, and really do appreciate the work you've done. Thank you. So the next item is item 6, matters referred to the executive and not dealt with elsewhere on the agenda. I see there are none. The West of England sub-region items not dealt with anywhere else on this agenda, if any. I'm not aware of any. Item 8 is the forward plan dated the 3rd of December, and I believe there is a correction to this, and I'm going to look to our Solicitor Nick Brain to help me on this one.
Sorry, just to say, Chairman, that on one of the items on the forward plan, the incorrect executive member had been identified, and that has been corrected.
Thank you. And colleagues, are we happy to note the forward plan? Thank you very much. And I now move on to item 9.
Don, this is Jeff Richardson.
Oh, hello, Jeff. Jeff Richardson.
Yep. Thank you. I just wanted to raise an issue around the Weston-super-Mare Transport Enhancement Scheme, which is listed for January on this forward plan. I've spoken already to Councillor Bridger about this. I would like to bring it to PCOM in one form or another. So if Councillor Bridger is happy with that, if we could agree.
I will ask Councillor Bridger on your behalf.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Richardson and I spoke about this yesterday at some length in terms of the reasons for the delay and the overspend and so forth. We the way we discussed it was not that this was a sort of a call-in of the decision. That's a pending decision, and Councillor Richardson has had sight of the draft decision. I think it's more in the sense of lessons learned. But I'd like looking to Councillor Richardson just to confirm that's my understanding is in fact what is his understanding.
Yeah, that's exactly the case.
Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so you're of one voice, and that's going to happen then.
Yeah.
Yes. Councillor Bridget, fine, lovely. Okay. So with that noted, are we happy to note the forward plan? Lots of nodding. Actually, thank you very much, colleagues. Now moving to item number 9, which is approval of the Council's digital strategy, and I believe Councillor Ash Cartman is going to introduce this.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, thank you for that. So this is the approval of our digital strategy, the Council's digital strategy, which incorporates kind of so much under the term digital, but also you've got an ICT and an information strategy appended, so there's a lot of documents here. The whole purpose of this is to set the framework within which the council will work in the next kind of few years in terms of how it engages with residents, how it supports its staff, etc. And the other strategies detail what kind of infrastructure changes we'll need, device changes, and also improvements to the way we manage the information, because as time goes on, we get more and more data. I think there's kind of 5 key ambitions in this, which I'll just quickly list off, I think, and then probably go out to comments or questions. I think it's about making residents' experience of accessing the council services and information much better. I think nothing stands still in digital, and we need to move with the times. It's also offering residents a way to improve their digital skills, so we maintain access and we deal with issues of equalities. There's also a wider thing about faster broadband connectivity, which we need to support as a council, and that includes the rollout of 5G. And I think, fourthly, something that we all feel here is making sure that officers and members have access to the right tools to do their jobs in a way that residents would expect us to have. I think the final ambition is that we're working much better with partners across the board. We can't deliver better broadband in North Somerset. Clearly, we require other people, but we can do better, and we want to do better of working with those people to do it. So there's no financial implications from this strategy. It sets out the framework itself about developments in the future in terms of how we transform our services, save money, and improve the experience of our residents. So I'd like to move to the recommendation, please, that the Executive endorses the principles, aims and activities of the Council's digital strategy for the period 2021 to 24 and approves the adoption of the strategy itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mike Solomon. So that's proposed and seconded. I have a couple of questions from the floor. Before I go to the floor, Amy Webb, you're the lead on this. Anything you wanted to say? No? Lovely. Okay, so the first one I've got is Sandra Hearn.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just taking my glasses off purely because I recently broke them, and I have reading some of the documents here. Because of my eyesight, I wasn't able to read them in as depth as I would like because of tiredness created by it. Now, I understand on iPads that councillors receive, we haven't got the speak version. I couldn't find it myself, but I understand on laptops you can have documents read out to you. Is that something that is going to be considered for us councillors? Because people like myself who unfortunately can break their glasses and can't read, is that involved in this new document? As I said, I wasn't able to read it fully.
I would have to demonstrate complete ignorance of the technology you described, and I'll look to colleagues, they can help. I've got Councillor Solomon.
Yeah, I believe that on an iPad you can. There is and I'll send an email to Councillor Hearn. There is a button you can press that will read out the content.
Thank you. I took advantage of a buy one, get one free offer at my optician, so safety, make myself safe. I've got Jeff Richardson next.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to make the general point that while I'm personally all in favour of technology, I constantly get emails from people telling me that not everybody in North Somerset wants to get online or contact the council through the website or through their accounts, and they would prefer much better access by phone, and also point out that sometimes this can be much quicker, and we possibly should be moving towards a one and done technology and technique rather than concentrating entirely on digital. So just as long as we keep that in mind when we're developing whatever projects we take out of this strategy, that will be fine. Thank you.
Thank you. That's noted. There's a certain irony of them emailing you to complain about digital connectivity, but that aside, I do take the point that you're making. I do think lots of people have raised that with me as well. I think Ash Carton wants to come back on that.
Yeah, I agree, Jeff. I think we are looking at that at the moment in terms of looking at the systems that sit behind the, if you like, the digital front end to enable people in, say, customer services in the contact centre to deal with things quickly and swiftly on a one-touch basis. So I think that is really important. I would say the argument about residents preferring, I think that I know some of them do. The trouble is we're starting to manage costs here, and I think it's a case of choices we have to make within the budget. And my argument would be is we're getting to the point where we have to provide that service to those that can't access digitally, but we're not going to be in a place to provide a service because people prefer not to use digital, sadly, is my view, maybe controversially, but that's the kind of approach we're looking to take.
Thank you. Are there any comments from executive colleagues? I see no hands up, so I don't think I've seen any other requests to speak. No? Okay, so there's a proposer and a second of this, so all those in favour? I think that's been approved unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. Item number 10 is the Commissioning and Procurement Approval Plan for Alternative Learning Provision Framework 2022 to 2027, and I believe Catherine Gibbons is going to introduce this.
Yes, thank you very much. As you've just said, we are seeking approval for the Joint Commissioning and Procurement Plan. As you know, local authorities have a statutory duty to arrange suitable full-time education for pupils that might be excluded or unable to attend for other reasons. And currently, North Somerset Council purchases alternative learning provision on a spot purchasing arrangement with individual providers. You could say that this might leave us unable to evidence value for money or have some degree of risk around due diligence with checks and quality assurance. So purchasing through a framework or a dynamic purchasing system would mitigate any risks like that. So as you've seen in the report, it outlines that Bristol City Council are recommissioning their alternative learning provision framework to go live in September, and the intention, September 22, sorry, and the intention and route to market, along with South Gloucestershire, is to open a regional framework contract for 5 years with the option to extend for 1 year. And this framework would be established to allow local authorities and schools within our areas to purchase provision from independent schools, part-time providers across the 3 distinct contract lots, supporting all pupils with alternative educational needs. All the providers on the BCC framework will go through stringent quality assurance processes and would be included in the framework on that basis. There's currently some soft market testing happening, and market engagements events are being conducted as we speak in December, throughout December 2021, virtually, unfortunately, due to the pandemic. From our point of view, any joint commissioning of this with Bristol City Council, North Somerset Council and South Gloucestershire local authorities would be governed by an inter-authority agreement with respective data sharing and quality assurance responsibilities determined at the outset of the framework. This framework, we believe, will help meet the duties that we have according to the Education Act of 1966, and it will mean that we can ensure there's a ready catalogue of providers that can be purchased from, who are already vetted, to check that they have the relevant policies and procedures in place and for whom references have been obtained. This will save time when searching for a placement within tight timeframes, such as the 6 days after a child is permanently excluded from school. The management of the framework ultimately rests with Bristol City Council, North Somerset Council, and South Gloucestershire are joining their procurement in effect. Budget responsibility lies with the Director of Children's Services, and we are already in contact with our providers to encourage them to apply to join the framework. I'd just like to add that this policy, this has been through scrutiny over the past 12 months, and they are broadly supportive, and a great deal of, as you've seen in the report, consultation has gone on. Therefore, I hope that you will support this and approve it today. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. We've got a recommendation which I presume you are proposing? Yes. And is a seconder, please? I see Councillor Bridget Petty seconding. Thank you. So we've got a proposer and seconder. We have the Director of Children's Services here. Do you have anything you want to say? No? Okay, fine. I can see no request to speak from non-executive members. Okay, any executive colleagues' comments? Fine. Well, thank you for the all the hard work that's gone into this, and we look forward to the results. And it's pretty key for me, certainly in terms of alternative provisions. So we'll go straight to a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. We now move on to the next item, which is the budget monitoring. That's Councillor Ash-Cartman.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm going to ask Amy Webb, our Section 151 officer, to make some few comments on that, and then I'll perhaps add something to after she's gone through the report in summary.
Thank you. So this is agenda item 11, which starts on 129 in your packs. So this is the updated revenue and capital forecast position as at month 6, so that's the end of September 2021. There are forecast budget pressures for the year end of 1.7 million, and that's after 1.2 million pounds of COVID grants. So that's a very small increase of around £100,000 since the month 5 report. The report does go on from page 133 onwards to say that the variance is coming up primarily in adult social care of 1.2 million, and that's page 133. 0.7 million in place, and offsetting savings of £0.2 million in children's. So I'll just talk a little bit about the reasons around that. So the adult social care, that's primarily growth in care packages exceeding the income. There are parking income losses in place, and also home to school transport pressures, and the looked after children numbers are lower, which is what's driving the underspend in children's. Otherwise, there's a balanced position in Corporate Services Directorate and Public Health. So just going on to 3.7, which is talking about capital budgets. There is a recommendation in there which is to increase the costs for the Winterstoke Bridge project, full business case, and that's £4.3 million. However, that will be offset by Ministry of Defence funding because it's their asset. And just a note to say that the appendix should be described as full and not dull, because there's a typo in that page. But the details of the capital budgets are in Appendix 3 on page 165. So I'm happy to take any questions, but at the moment we're not making recommendations on the revenue position. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We've got two recommendations on the paper. I presume Councillor Cartman will propose.
Yes, happy to, yes.
And a seconder, please. Councillor Bridger. Thank you, Councillor Bridger. So are there any comments from non-executive councillors? I'm frantically trying to use my Teams app to find out, and I can't see anybody. No? Okay. Are there any comments from executive colleagues? Okay. Well, thank you for the comprehensive report. We'll go straight for the vote. There are two recommendations. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, colleagues. Now move on to item number 12, which I think is the same double act.
Not quite. Oh, sorry. Yep. Happy for me to lead on this? Yep. Sorry. Yeah. So not quite the same double act. I'm going to start this time. So this is about the update in terms of our next year's revenue budget and also the longer term, medium term financial plan as well, which we put together in the context of our aims to be open, fair and green. We kind of always knew this was going to be a difficult year. I think the context for members and exec members is that we can put up council tax by 2%, we can add another 1% for an adult social care preset, which is 3%, but of course inflation's running at over 4%, so we're looking at a real terms cut to our resources in that level. But it's not only our costs are increasing, demand also for our services is increasing, so we've got some difficult challenges and choices ahead of us, and this report sets out what some of those are. We were in a reasonably good position, and I think we still are, but I think we were surprised at the announcement by the Chancellor or the Prime Minister to increase the minimum wage by almost 7%. We'd budgeted for something smaller in anticipation, which of course we welcome that rise, but it did give us almost £2 million worth of costs we weren't expecting. So in that context, to have a gap in this report of 0.8 million is quite an achievement, but it is nonetheless still a gap. And you'll see in there are some proposals. We've given the, if you like, the raw list of proposals that we want to be open about. And there will undoubtedly be things in there that we will talk to officers about, and we will decide which ones to take forward. But obviously, if we don't take a savings proposal forward, it increases our budget gap. Just to put it in context, though, the gap we're looking at is about 0.5% of our annual budget. So it's significant, but let's not get it out of context. And I know work continues from Amy and her team and the other directorates to see what we can do to bridge that gap. And we also look forward to final settlement details from central government in a week or so, where we would hope that we might receive a little bit more money in terms of grants than we're budgeting for, because we always budget very prudently. But as always, the priority is to protect frontline services and to align our objectives with open, fair and green. So I'd open this to questions, but if there are none, I would recommend approval of this report.
Okay, so do I see a seconder for the Councillor Catherine Gibbons? So Amy Webb, did you want to say anything?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, just in terms of the next steps, obviously officers will be working with the executive in terms of those proposals for growth and saving items, and that will include full equality impact assessments to come forward with the proposals. The settlement is expected on the 15th of December, although there might be some delay to that. So the next update will be available to the meeting in January. Thank you.
Thank you. So all councillors have access to the papers, and any queries, Councillor Carton, are we having a briefing on this?
We've had a briefing into the exec, and it's going to PCOM on Monday for members.
Okay, so Jeff Richardson's panel will be having an all-member briefing on Monday to go through the proposals, and please do feed into those comments. Okay, I'm going to see if there's any. My technology skills are not as great as I think, are they? I don't see any requests to speak from non-executive members. I have Councillor Petty wishes to speak.
Thank you. I welcome all the hard work being done by many different officers across all the departments to try to identify ways to make sure that these budgets can balance, and I respect the really difficult work that is taking place and understand that after many years of not enough funding from central government, this remains a really, really difficult task. I'll continue to ask that those officers with exceptional track record and professional experience use everything they can to think about innovative ways to address some of the places where we have funding pressures, but can try to identify things that could also meet our green agenda. I think that we have to continue to challenge ourselves to do that and to do more, because we will continue to not have enough funding to do all these really important things. And until central government addresses some of these really serious issues that we face, then we are where we are. But the climate emergency is not going away. And some of the things we spend money on continue to produce more emissions, and it feels like it's business as usual. I'm not saying I know the answer to that. I'm saying, please, everybody look at what research there is from other authorities, what opportunities there are, and bring innovation. And I believe that this executive is open to listening to that kind of innovation, so that we continue to challenge and challenge ourselves to serve our communities as best we can, in regard of the commitments we've made to be open, fairer and greener. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mike Bell.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to, it feels like my monthly rant about the government's failure to fund social care fairly, but I think it's really important in the context of where we are with the medium-term financial plan and our budget for next year, but also our budget monitor for the current year, to just reflect that all of the rhetoric that we've seen from the government about solving social care and delivering a fairer funding landscape just doesn't stack up, because the truth is that we are overspending on social care services in the current financial year. And when we say overspending, what we really mean is that we are paying for vital services which older and vulnerable people in North Somerset rely on in order to continue to live independently and healthily. You know, we're not talking about nice to have things here. We're talking about services that are absolutely vital to people's independence, good health and well-being. And we haven't got sufficient money to pay for that today. And what the government's plan for social care has delivered is lots of additional costs for local authorities and for care providers, and not sufficient funding to help meet those costs. So a significant proportion of the challenge that we've got for the next financial year is related to social care. If you look at the figures in the report, you will see that we've had to rebase the budget to reflect the cost pressures that we're seeing at the moment. We've had to put in extra funding to reflect things like the national insurance change, the UK living wage changes, and so on. Lots of extra costs for us and for all of the private and voluntary sector providers of care services, and insufficient balancing extra income and grant from government to help us. And it's not even as though they will allow us to use the tools that we've got at our own disposal to rise to the challenge, because they still insist on tying the hands of local councils in terms of our ability to raise council tax or social care precept to help balance the books. So it's very, very concerning that in our budget proposals and our draft savings list at the moment, there are further savings that we're having to identify in our social care budgets in order to make ends meet. And this is the most stupid, really, of decisions to make, isn't it? Because we already know that we don't have sufficient funding to meet the current need in year, and we're having to cut our cloth accordingly. We absolutely are not going to turn that around by making further savings in the next financial year. So my plea between now and the financial settlement being announced by the government is simple. If you cannot find the money that is necessary to help us to deliver the social care that by law, by government law, we are required to provide, then at least give us the flexibilities and freedoms locally to make decisions according to the needs of North Somerset, and ask our residents to pay more through their council tax or through social care precept. You can't have it both ways. You can't increase the costs and the burdens and the expectations on local councils and at the same time prevent us from having access to the tools to rise to that challenge. So I just wanted to make that plea again. We all know that the government isn't listening, but nevertheless, it's important to make the point. Thank you.
Yes, and of course, very frighteningly, Mike, we have additional pressures on children's services as well. And on top of that, our government has said that this 1.25% increase in tax will solve the problem, but we know in reality that will all go to the National Health Service and we'll get nothing apart from additional responsibilities. So I would urge my colleagues from the Conservative Party to be asking their friend Jake Berry MP, who made that very point in Parliament, about actually getting some funding for adult social care into the system, and stop pretending you're sorting it out when you aren't. Okay, I don't see any other requests to speak. There's a recommendation which is proposed and seconded. Can I have votes, please? All those in favour? Thank you, colleagues. That's unanimous. And that is completes the decision-making part of the meeting. We now go on to the oral reports by executive councillors, and I will do this in the order in which I can see them on the room. So I'll start with Councillor Ash Cartman. Anything from you, Ash?
No, thank you.
Bridget Petty?
No, thank you.
Mark Caniford? Catherine Gibbons?
No, I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Steve Bridger?
Yes, Chair. Please.
Thank you. Last.
Wanted to make a brief statement, if I may, brief update on the Metro West project, which should only take a minute or two. So as colleagues will know, as members will know, following the Secretary of State's decision to extend the statutory deadline to determine the development consent order in terms of bringing the Portishead rail line back into service by a further 6 months, potentially up to the 19th of April, next year, North Somerset Council and the West of England Combined Authority. We've escalated our sort of the significant financial and programme implications of that extension on the scheme via a letter to the Secretary of State from our Chief Executive and the WECA Chief Executive, and in fact via a House of Commons debate. So the letters from the Chief Executives, I think, went to the Secretary of State on the 12th of November, and those letters highlighted how a delay to the scheme, how we could potentially accommodate a 3-month delay to the scheme, albeit that would bring additional costs and risks to the programme, but a delay beyond mid-January would result in some ecology windows being missed, for example, and effectively an impact on the programme of effectively a delay of a further 12 months, and obviously a cost impact which would run into many millions of pounds, which would frankly be hard for the project to bear. So I think on the 26th of November, Dr. Liam Fox, MP, applied further pressure with the House of Commons debate. He reiterated the implications of us not receiving a DCO decision by mid-January, and the need to understand, I think, what further information the DfT needs in terms of quote-unquote environmental matters is required in order for him to make a positive decision on the DCO. I think the response from the Minister in the House of Commons that day was a bit lame, frankly. In terms of the DCO process, North Somerset Council has responded to the DfT request for further information on carbon budgets, which I think we feel is something that's easily resolved. We had to do that by the 23rd of November, and that's now pending comments from other interested parties, and I think they have until today to respond to that. So while we've made continued attempts to engage with the Department for Transport at different levels, we've received no clear indication on when the decision on the DCO will be determined. So we will continue, obviously, to lobby vigorously over the coming weeks, but yeah, state of affairs is quite precarious, I think, at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Bridger. It's just disappointing. This is just taking forever. We're in a climate emergency. We're trying to institute public transport reforms, and we seem to be taking forever to do it. And those who live near the line are particularly disappointed. Councillor Solomon.
No, nothing from me, thank you, Chair.
And Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chairman. I suppose, again, at the risk of being a stuck record, just to remind everyone, of course, and anyone listening at home, that the COVID pandemic is absolutely still with us. It is only a matter of time over the next few days and weeks before we get some cases of Omicron identified in North Somerset. We know that it's spreading across England now, and it's likely that the government will be announcing further restrictions in due course. So I think it's just really important to underline that as much as people can do the right things over the next few weeks please do so. Continue to wear face coverings. Please get your tests regularly. Make sure that you have vaccines and the booster vaccine particularly if you are eligible. And try to make good decisions as you're going about your daily life, especially during this festive season, and just take the reasonable precautions that you can to help protect yourself and other people. And I think it feels like the right time as well, as we are a couple of weeks before Christmas, just again to say a huge thank you to all of the council staff and all of the community and the NHS workers who've continued to do so much throughout the pandemic. We heard a lot of gratitude and thanks for our care workers and frontline staff in the early part of this year, and I think to a degree it's gone off the boil, hasn't it? And we've perhaps all become a bit complacent about the risk of COVID, but also the hard work that continues. But I think we are all in awe and enormous debt to those that continue to work hard to serve the community and protect the community. And the very least that we owe those people is our thanks, and for us to do our very best to minimise the risks of spreading COVID further during this festive season.
Nick Brain.
Thank you, Chairman. Just off the back of Councillor Bell's announcement there, just to touch base with scrutiny arrangements, Councillor Bell and I have discussed the return to formal meetings in the new year when the next session of scrutiny panels take place. Clearly, we will continue to observe guidance and see how COVID develops, but the intention at the moment is to return to formal meetings, which would be face-to-face. I know that will come with some caution for some members, officers, and indeed the public, but that's the current intention, that we will go to return to formal meetings in the new year, subject of the 20 developments.
Thank you. And just to reiterate Mike Bell's comments and to also pass our thanks on to all those workers who have worked throughout the pandemic, those in logistics, those in our shops and distributive trades. And I'd also like to thank very much on behalf of not only the executive, but I'm sure all the councillors, indeed the public of North Somerset, all our own North Somerset officers and our contractors who have worked throughout and have done an absolutely brilliant job to keep us safe. And to go back to Mark Crosby's address, started this from not knowing what we should do in terms of a pandemic. We didn't have a manual, and we've made it up as we've gone along. And I think we've looked after people very well. And look at things like North Somerset Together, have been absolutely wonderful initiatives, and I hope those will last into the very long future. So thank you everybody that's contributed. Thank you all the people who contributed today. And I wish everybody a very happy and safe Christmas. So thank you.